When we were planning for Irving B. Weber Days this year, we specifically wanted to honor Irving by celebrating the history of his beloved hometown, Iowa City. We specifically planned events that would honor and help to preserve the history of Iowa City. Through this planning process, we thought it would be a wonderful honor for Irving to establish an annual history lecture in his honor. We hope that this will be an ongoing event that highlights events of importance in Iowa City and Johnson County. However, we thought that it would be very appropriate for the first lecture to focus on Irving Weber himself. Our speaker tonight is Norwood Bud Lewis II. Bud has recruited Celia Berger, Darrell Albright, and Bob Stein to help him out this evening, and he will introduce them during his lecture. Bud is a lifelong resident of Iowa City. He graduated from University High School in 1943, and 2 months later he joined the Army to serve in World War II. He served on a B-17 crew from 1943 to 1946. He then went on to serve in the National Guard and the Army Reserves for 40 years. In the fall of 1946, he enrolled at the University of Iowa and graduated with a bachelor's degree in pharmacy in 1951. He then began work at Henry Lewis Incorporated, a downtown Iowa City business that was started by Bud's grandfather in 1886. Henry Lewis Incorporated, located at 124 East College Street, was a pharmacy and the very first Eastman Kodak dealership west of the Mississippi. Bud worked at Henry Lewis Incorporated from 1951 to 1973. In 1973, Henry Lewis Incorporated moved to 506 East College Street, which was the previous location of the McGovern Funeral Home, and ended its pharmacy business at that time and took on microscopes. In 1974, Bud started his second career in the building business and was involved in the building of the Old Capitol Mall, the Faith Baptist Church, as well as many homes in Iowa City. For 3 years, beginning in 1973, he also served as the night pharmacist at Mercy Hospital, and then Bud officially retired in 1989. Bud is married to Betty Josephine Morgan. They've been married for 50 years, and they have 2 children and 4 grandchildren. Bud is active in the Iowa City Rotary Club and has organized sending ambulances, fire trucks, and medical supplies to Guatemala. Bud received the Rotary's Service Above Self Award and the Military Affairs Hayek Award. He currently writes a weekly column in the Iowa City Gazette Neighbors section about the history of Iowa City. Now, some people have said to me and to Bud that he's going to be Iowa City's next Irving Weber. Well, let me tell you, Bud has an opinion about that, and I'm sure he's going to share that with us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor to introduce Bud Lewis.
I had a close shave when that introduction started. Let's clear one thing up right off the bat. I'm not another Irving Weber, and no one else will be. I think that I've been told a couple of times that, oh, you're going to be the next Irving Weber because I do these articles, but there won't be another Irving Weber. He was one of the finest men I knew. I think we all agree on that, and so we'll clear that matter up. And I'm going to ask your permission to stay sitting down because I've got a cast on my right ankle here. I don't stand very good. I've got a few people to introduce. You know, I thought this was going to be an easy thing because I thought he wrote 9 books and all I have to do is talk 5 minutes on each book. That's 45 minutes. And she said, no, someone else is going to do the books. So we had to start back on that. I think I'll introduce them, folks. Discretion is the better part of valor, so I'll introduce my wife, Betty Jo. Well, it's Betty Andretti, really. You'll have to ask me why I put the Andretti on. If you've ridden with her, you might know that. There's Betty Andretti. And we're going to have Celia Berger is going to speak on the Irving Weber School. And Colonel Bob Stein is going to talk about the swimming end of Irving's life. And Darrell Albright with the Lions Club is going to speak. And in fact, Darrell gave me a nice thing here. I said we need something when I introduce you. And he gave me a full page here, undergraduate education, Bachelor of Science, University of Iowa, Master of Arts, PhD. Oh, PhD, well, doctor. Retired from active participation in graphic printing and design. Board of Directors, Graphic Printing and Design, member of Iowa Women's Athletic Development Board. Member of Iowa City Noon Host Lions Club, and you're the recipient of 3 awards, the Melvin Jones Award in Lionism, the Strongs-Weber Award in Lionism, and the recipient of the Sertoma Service to Mankind Award. And he's served in various capacities of several nonprofit organizations, including the March of Dimes, the Iowa Special Olympics, and remains involved in fundraising for many organizations. And his talk this evening will concentrate on Irving Weber, the Lion and the Man. Now, don't you wish you'd had something for me to tell about the other? Bob Stein. Okay. I would start by saying that I've only had one time in my life that I had a little trouble with Irving. It was on the occasion of my 70th birthday, and my wife had arranged a surprise party for me. And it would have been a surprise party if some guy at church hadn't come up and said, "Bud, I'm sorry, I got something else to do this afternoon. I can't come to your surprise party." That's true. But anyway, I positioned myself at one end of the room at home, sitting on the piano bench so I could stand up when a lady came. And at the other end of the room, there's Irving Weber, and all the people are at the other end of the room talking to Irving Weber. I was kind of lonely being down there at the other end, but that's great. The first time that I ever met Irving was, I would think it's just before the war. He had called the store and wanted someone to run the slide projector. He was going to introduce a new ice cream called Orkovan ice cream. It's the ice cream made from the vanilla orchid, and he had me come over and show him slides. And I was very impressed even at that time with that man. I just, his demure, his way he talked to people and the way he was, I knew he was going to be a great guy. There's one memory I'll never forget. On his 80th birthday, or was it 85th we went? 85th, the fire truck ride? His 85th birthday, I took him for a ride on my antique fire truck all through town and through the city park, and his gray hair was blowing and he was having a big time. And he said, "I've waited all my life to ride on a fire truck." Now, is this coming through okay? Can you hear okay? Okay. I want to introduce someone else here tonight. I would like Lolly Eggers to stand up, and she's going to tell you a little bit about something she's working on. Where? Yeah, good. Let Lolly tell you. She's the one that probably should be doing this program tonight.
Glad to ask me to do this, and I'm glad to say I'm working on Irving Weber's biography, and still at the research stage. And all I want to say tonight is that I'm interested in hearing Irving Weber's stories, and so if people would get in touch with me and say, "I'd like to talk to you about Irving Weber," I'd like to know about that. So come up to me afterwards or whatever. But that's what I'm doing, and it's going to be a while before there is a book, but I'm having lots of fun.
Put me down for a copy now.
Okay, first order.
Okay. Got one fly up here bugging me. Irving's son Willis couldn't be here tonight. He wished he could be, but he was in town a week or so ago. And Willis is a very great guy, and he told me many things that I didn't know, and was very sorry he couldn't be here. He had to go to Minnesota to pick up his wife, but he had quite a military career. He graduated, he finished his military career lieutenant colonel, and I think he must have had 25 or 30 years service. Do many of you know him? Have you met him? He's a great guy. And he told me that his dad was born December 19th, 1900 in Iowa City at the home on Iowa Avenue. Now that's a good deal, because now anytime we hear that he did something when he was 89 or he did something when he was 62, we know that was 1962 or 1989. Since he's born in 1900, you can always tell what year it was. He was an only child, and he attended the Fourth Ward School where the old junior high was. And in 1918, while he was still in high school, he applied for a job at Sidwell Dairy. He said that he looked too small. They weren't sure that he could handle the job. But he started the job driving a Model T truck to deliver milk and ice cream. In one of these books, there's a neat picture of him sitting in his Model T truck delivering. And that was the start of 69 years of life in the dairy business. He didn't start writing articles until his 72nd year, And after that time, he wrote a total of 850 articles. Now, right here, since we're up to his college time, I'm going to let Bob Stein come up. And I think if you listen carefully when he gets up here, you're going to hear something kind of interesting. And I'm hoping that this fly will go over to him when he's standing over there talking. Okay, Colonel Bob Stein. Now listen carefully.
Good evening. It's an honor to be here. I think almost all of us know each other. Some of us have even flown together in weather. Right, Tommy? Can you hear me all right? Is there some? Okay. And Bob Hibbs was a scout leader for Lieutenant Colonel now, Steve Stein, serving our country in Japan. He'd want me to say hello to you, Bob. It's nice to see all of you. Irving Weber and I met on 16 September 1951. It was my second day in Iowa City. I'd been recruited to come from Duluth, Minnesota, and come south. Like I-35, I thought it was a great thing. Coming out of Minnesota to swim for Iowa, Coach Dave Armbruster, and at that time, Doc Councilman, the legendary Doc Councilman, who then went to Indiana. And it was my second day in Iowa City, the 16th of September. And for those of you who are really familiar with the pool, there was a gold brass stem at the shallow end of the pool, and when you got out, you reached up, and when I came up, Irving Weber was standing there. That's where we met. I was 18 years old. And we became friends that day, and the friendship continues, being at a special event like this, celebrating our dear beloved friend. Even when I was in Vietnam flying missions, Irving Weber wrote to me. That was Irving, wasn't it? Because Irving and I were so close over swimming to start with, and then other things too, but swimming, my remarks will mainly be in that regard. Irving caught David Armbruster, Iowa swim coach's eye, and Betty tells me it's Halsey Hall, where she had to take swimming. My lady, Betty. Halsey Hall, just right across from the Union down there on Jefferson Street. Little pool there, 20 yards, and Irving was in there swimming the backstroke. And Dave Armbruster saw him. He says, "Why don't you try out for the team?" And in 1922, Irving Weber became Iowa's first All-American swimmer. That has something just incredible. He swam almost daily. I think probably most of us who knew him would know that he'd come over when we were swimming. I swam from 51 to 55 before I went in the Air Force, and he was there every day I was there. At one point or another, Irving Weber was in that swimming pool with us, and he started every home meet. You know, the starter, take your mark, set, and he fired that gun every single time. I don't think he missed one during the 4 years. If he did, my teammates and I don't remember. We thought he was there for every single meet. And he himself, again, swam 400 or 500 yards a day, 20, 25, 30 lengths. What a guy. As Bud said, all you have to do is know that that was 1951, and Irving was not quite, he was in December 19th of that year, he was 51. So when I met him, he was 50. And now for those of us who are at least 50 but way under 100, we can very much identify with that. I'm not sure if everyone knows, but Irving Weber at over 80, when he and Bud and Betty did this thing, Irving Weber held the national record for his age group in the 100-yard backstroke. He was the national record holder for those over 80. What a guy. We had an annual ice cream, I'm kind of meandering here a little bit, but we had an annual ice cream eating contest. And you know, the quality checked, I mean, there was only one kind of ice cream. And it was in the, as I remember, it was right across from what's now the City Hall area down there, right, you know, next to where the farmer's market is. as I remember, that's where we had our ice cream eating contest. And what that was is Irving, through his company, paid for ice cream, and we, swimmers and gymnasts, we were the Dolphin Club. We put on the annual dolphin shows every homecoming. I think many of you came to those shows. We were on the trapeze and doing stuff in the water and so on. It cost you $1 to get in, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart because I had a dolphin swimming scholarship. You paid my tuition, and I love you. True story, nonfiction. I know I write fiction. That's nonfiction. Well, this annual dolphin eating contest got to be quite a thing, and ladies and gentlemen, hang on. Kim Austin and Ronnie Johnson hold the record. Now, the rules are these. It's 2 hours on the clock, and Irving kept time, so you know it was accurate. 2 hours, you can eat as much ice cream as fast as you want to, and the one who eats the most is the winner, declared the glutton of the year. No fair throwing up. You're DQ'd, just like when you jump on a relay, you're DQ'd if you throw up. So you have to keep it down. 2 hours, and Ronnie Johnson and Kim Austin hold the record, 10 pints of ice cream in 2 hours. Can you believe that? Nonfiction. I think we all know that Weber Zimmerman building in Chicago, which is a beautiful building. I hope you've seen it on the way into Chicago. You see it on that big interstate highway there. It's just off to the left-hand side. It is a beautiful building, and of course it's named in his honor. The ringing of the bell came across when Irving and Martha took an around-the-world tour. It was in 1960 that they did that, and they went to, you're right, bud, he's over here. Now, I used to be a fighter pilot, so this guy needs to be careful. Missed him. They went to, among other things, to the Olympic Games in Tokyo, and Irving saw that. He saw them start each of the preliminary, semifinal, and final rounds with the ringing of the bell. And he thought it would be a wonderful idea to come back here and do that, and so he did. And he rang the bell at every home meet, and that includes the women and the men, the Swimmin' women and the Iowa men. He rang it at every meet until he fell and broke his ankle that year. It was every single time. He was so faithful about that. And it became a tradition here, the bell ringer. On March 22nd, 1994, a piece of my nonfiction here, I wrote a letter to the executive director of the National Iowa, at that time, Letterman's Club. It's now the Letter Winners Club because we have men and women in the group, and it's now the Varsity Club. At that time, it was a Lettermen's Club, and I wrote, Dear Les, the purpose of this letter is to urge the selection committee to induct Irving Weber into the Hall of Fame. Our Hall of Fame bio shows him as Iowa's first All-American swimmer in 1922. Only one person can be first at anything, and that alone sets Irving Weber apart. But there is other significant history about him that I feel you should know. While he was still competing for the Hawkeye swim team, he paid his own way to compete in many Midwestern and national AAU meets. This practice continued long after he graduated from Iowa. Although I cannot give you specific results of his efforts while he was still a student athlete, I do know that he was Midwestern AAU backstroke champion 3 times. In 1924, he was the bronze medalist in the National AAU in Indianapolis 220-yard backstroke. He was the bronze medalist, national championships. After winning 3 varsity letters in swimming at Iowa and graduating, Irving continued the closest kind of association with the swimming program. He assisted Hall of Fame coach Dave Armbruster as a starter of all home meets. He helped keep the program viable during some of the most austere budgeting times in Iowa swimming history. Over the years, he continued to excel as an athlete. For example, until recently, he held a national record for swimming masters groups for 80 to 89 years of age. Of unique significance is the loyalty and devotion Irving has given to our National Letterman's Club throughout his lifetime. He is and always has been a person that we who have served on the Letterman's Club board of directors could count on. He's a contributor to the Hawkeye Fund. And until he was injured in the fall of 1993, he attended and rang the bell at every Iowa home swimming meet. In closing, I highly recommend this distinguished man for induction to the Hall of Fame. This is the brochure, 1994. And I'm proud to tell you that on September the 3rd, 1994, our own Irving Weber was inducted into the Iowa Athletic Hall of Fame. And the bronze plaque with the bust of his face reads Irving Weber, swimming 1922. Career highlights: Iowa's first All-American swimmer, 150-yard backstroke in 1922. National age group record holder in the backstroke at age 73. Only man to follow Iowa's competitive swimming program throughout its 77-year history. For 30 years, official bell ringer signaling start of Iowa's home meets, and named in his honor Irving Weber Walkway of Champions in the Iowa Fieldhouse. Also, the Irving B. Weber Elementary School. All of us who swam and dove for Iowa think Irving Weber was the grand old man of swimming and diving. Each person who swam or dove for Iowa knew Irving, and he knew each swimmer and each diver, the only person ever. It all began for Irving in Iowa in 1917, and every one of us who knew him loved him. In closing, I had the privilege of being one of several who nominated Irving Weber for the Lions International President's Award. I wrote to I believe it was Vice President Gatsky at that time. I said, as you may know, Irving Weber received that award from the Lions, and in concluding the nomination letter, I quoted Irving this way: Rudyard Kipling, "The tumult and the shouting dies, the captains and the kings depart. Still stands thine ancient sacrifice, an humble and a contrite heart." Ladies and gentlemen, Irving Weber, Swimming All-American, Iowa.
Now, do you suppose that's why he lived a long, healthy life, because he swam right up pretty close to the end? I think so, don't you? Willis also told me that that Irving was a famous, what do I want to say, admirer of Jim Thorpe, you know, the famous athlete, and he went to 3 Olympic Games to see him. He went to Los Angeles in 1932, to Tokyo in '64, and Mexico in '68. As far as his military career, Irving kind of fell between the cracks. He was too young for World War I and too old for World War II. I hadn't realized that Irving operated the Cedar Rapids branch of the company, and for years he commuted each day on the old Cedar Rapids road that had 81 curves. Remember, that was in, believe it or not, that road. And then they also said that worldwide, the road between Cortina and Bolzano, Italy, had more curves than this one did. And one time on a mountaineer trip, Betty and I took that road. But I'm getting off the subject. I do that too bad. Willis said that his dad had a supper time at 7 o'clock coming back from Cedar Rapids, and if he's running late, he always called and wondered what kind of ice cream he'd like him to bring. He was a great lover of ice cream, and his wife Martha said that they would be rich if Irving hadn't stopped to eat up all the profit. Now, Irving helped organize the Quality Check Dairy Association, and after retiring at age 65, he continued to be active to it in years. Now it's time for Darrell Albright to give us a little word about the Lions Club.
Thank you, Bud. Before I go any farther, though, I would be remiss if I didn't say the person left out of this formula of thanking was Carol Logsdon herself. She has worked tremendously hard, and thank you, Carol. Irving Weber joined the Iowa City Noon Lions Club in 1931. The club itself has been renamed the Iowa City Host Noon Lions Club because it has fostered 2 other Lions clubs in Iowa City. He served as president during the 1936-37 year. He was always an active participant in any fundraising activity the club had until late in life, and then he offered advice and encouragement. The club celebrated its 80th anniversary in 2000, having been chartered on December 18, 1920. On January 22nd, 1973, at 72 years of age, Irving began his journalistic career writing articles for the Iowa City Press-Citizen. To the end, Irving was grateful to the man who got him started and who became a dear friend, William Eganton. One of Irving's final requests was that I should publicly thank Mr. Eganton for his guidance and training in better journalistic efforts. In 1976, with Irving's blessing and permission from the Iowa City Press-Citizen, the Noon Lions Club published what was then to become the first of 8 volumes of Irving Weber's History of Iowa City. To those who have his volumes will note that the first volume, the yellow one there, was not numbered. For true to his humble nature, he never figured there would be a second volume. These 8 volumes, along with Maggie Conroy's one-act play on Irving Weber, and the University of Iowa's sesquicentennial booklet on Iowa, leave a tremendous mark on the history of Iowa City, much of would be lost forever had it not been for his efforts. As a footnote, it should be pointed out that those persons who do not have a complete set of his books are relegated to either reading volumes 1 through 3 in the Iowa City Public Library, or, as some have done, go around to various estate sales and attempt to pick up the missing copies. With Irving's passing, there are no plans to reprint those out-of-print volumes. At the time of his death, Irving was already involved in pulling together articles for yet another volume. Factored into all the work involved must be the recognition that Irving Weber donated every dollar of the proceeds to the club for sight and hearing projects. The total net proceeds, and they're still growing, are now in excess of $80,000. I first became involved with Irving in the Iowa City Lions book projects in the early 80s. At that time, I became aware of a little-known fact which shows what kind of a man Irving really was. I found that not only was he not being paid any of the proceeds, but he was actually buying his own volumes at retail price to give to persons who asked him for a copy, and there were many. When we finally became aware of this, the club unanimously insisted that he not be charged for those volumes he gave away. Even then, he would only accept a few at a time. In all, Irving wrote nearly 850 articles for the Press-Citizen. Imagine starting a new career at 72 and having it span another quarter of a century. What made Irving special to me and thousands of others? As he often said, "I'm just an old man with a good memory." This memory was truly remarkable, as those who knew him can attest. Experts probably have a name for it, but I call it associative memory. He was always relating one event to another. Case in point, several Lions were seated at lunch one day when Irving, to promote conversation, asked persons at the table how long they had lived in Iowa City. I remember especially one person who said he believed that his parents had moved to Iowa City in 1933. Irving asked to make sure what the parents' first names were, and then said he believed they had moved to Iowa City in 1932, since a cornerstone on a certain building was laid that year they moved to town. Normally, that would be the end of the story. The man discounted Irving's memory and let it go at that. But alas, the following week the man apologized to Irving, stating that he was indeed correct and his parents had moved to Iowa City in 1932. This wasn't any rare happening. I, along with other Lions, have had the opportunity to accompany Irving on his autograph days and saw the man in action. People would come up and introduce themselves, and he would start relating tales about their family. It was a sight to behold. And true to his nature, he wouldn't be rushed by the length of the line. He would continue discussion to the natural conclusion. Secondly, as a listener, he had no equal. He would lock onto your conversation and listen to everything you had to say, often asking little questions to round out the story. This is in contrast to most of us who are too busy thinking about what we are going to say next to listen carefully to what is being said. Thirdly, Irving was a considerate man. He was always careful about the feelings of others. Deciding on what articles would be included in the next volume was always an exercise that would take several meetings. I can so vividly remember some of the committee meetings with lions such as George Matheson, Tom Gray, Guy Harris, Cal Meether, and others, where as a printer of record, I would keep saying we're going to have to cut down some of the proposed stories to make this volume manageable. Irving would say, okay, but he was insistent that the committee accept responsibility for excluding any particular story. We would sit around a conference table in Cal Meether's office and debate the merits of a particular story as it fit into the upcoming volume, and Irving would only serve as a resource person. He had a great sense of humor and a work ethic that would make most of us pale by comparison. Finally on my list of outstanding attributes of Irving Weber was that he was truly a gentleman in every sense of the word. In working closely with him on volumes, he often had cause for issuing a cross word or being dismayed at a particular happening, but such was not the case. He was truly of the old school, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. At the same time, I don't want to leave the impression that Irving wasn't a man of his convictions, for that would be a faulty impression. Two examples, and there are many, should serve to make the point. One concerned serving margarine with a meal at the athletic club. True to his upbringing in the dairy industry, Irving was insistent that real butter be served at our meals, and it was. While I can no longer remember all the details of Irving's proposed solution, I do know he was adamant in his opposition to widening of Melrose Street. But he was not just your typical beginner. He had a proposed solution to the widening. While he eventually lost the decision, people knew exactly where he stood. As I pointed out on the day of his funeral, in this day and age when superlatives are thrown around without thought, I can only say that Irving Weber was the person we would all like to be, but can't quite live up to the standard. He was Irving Weber. I would add that if Irving were here today, he would be embarrassed at all the attention being paid to Irving Weber. But he would be extremely proud of the fact that Iowa City cares about remembering its history and its heritage, for I believe he truly loved Iowa City. In closing, I'd like to read from Irving Weber's last unpublished column, which was found on his bedside table after he died. It was titled, "I Ain't Gonna Cry No More, No More." The other night I woke up with a mild heart attack. Usually breathing heavily, it disappears. This time it didn't, and the nurse gave me a nitroglycerin tablet to put under my tongue, and the pain quickly disappeared. But the next morning, in using my word processor, I had difficulty seeing clearly. It kept getting more and more difficult, and then I discovered the left lens had fallen out of my glasses, and we couldn't find it. I felt I had enough troubles and was reminded of the famous Hoosier children's poems by James Whitcomb Riley that my mother used to read to me. The little boy had fallen down, skinned both knees, stubbed his toe, had abrasions on both elbows, and a big bump on his head. His mother duly bandaged all the abrasions, and the little boy appreciated his mother's help, and to show his appreciation, in between sobs, trying to smile, "Mama, I ain't gonna cry no more, no more. I ain't gonna cry no more." I loved and still remember those Riley poems my mother read to me, and I find many people of my vintage, plus others older and younger, who remember them likewise. I still have them, and the inscription inside the cover reads, "From Mama to Irving on his first birthday, December 19th, 1901. So whenever a series of hard luck piles up, smile and remember that poem. I ain't gonna cry no more, no more. It helps. Try it, and if necessary, shed a few tears, then smile.
That was fantastic. My eyes got all sweaty. Irving didn't start any articles until he was 72, and his first articles were the Look Up series. And I'm not supposed to talk about the books, but his first articles, he'd go around and take the pictures of the top of a building, and you were to guess which building it was. By the way, in German, the word Weber means weaver. So I guess Irving sufficiently wove a bunch of stories, didn't he? Okay. One funny incident, during the war, sugar was scarce, and Irving decided to use honey. And he found a farmer that was supplying honey, but he didn't realize that the farmer's bees were near an onion patch, and made the ice cream taste terrible. And you already mentioned Bill Eaton. I was going to mention that told me once that his best helper was Bill Eganton. He got the detailed facts and took pictures of her article, so that Bill helped him with the punchline. Now I'd like to call on Celia Berger to talk on schools. You can take as much time as you want. We have to be out here by 10:30, they said. Take as much time as you want.
Isn't it always just such a treat to share the stories of Irving Weber? And I was sitting there thinking, well, this is like triangulation. The same essence comes out no matter whom you speak to or who speaks about Irving. You know it's truth when you keep hearing the same characteristics again and again and again. And it just continues. I also think about Irving's athletics, because they really were a metaphor for his life. All of the traits that we admire in a truly good athlete, in teaming, and collaborating, and honor and integrity, of the best that we see in athletics, and the way in which the game is played, when it's played well, is how he lived his life. And Walter Cronkite said that, I can't imagine a person becoming a success who doesn't give his game of life everything he's got. And I thought that kind of pulls together that whole metaphor of his life, and that he did give it everything he could to it. I felt that way about what he gave to Weber's school. And that journey with him was short, but it was so intent and so wonderful for so many people, and for him. I think he truly looked at that experience as something kind of awesome. And those of us who had the privilege of sharing it from his years, people who knew him for years and years before, and his friends who shared in that experience, it was pretty special. He was known to refer to that experience of having that school named for him as one of the really special connections in his life. And he really felt it was a very awesome responsibility, and very honored to have the school named for him. And one time I said to him, well, you know, you've had another building named for you. Well, that one had 2 names on it. So this was Irving B. Weber only. And he really delighted in it. And he had that part of him that really was very truthful about, I'm pretty pleased about this. This is pretty nice. And I think that's what gave the rest of us joy when we celebrated with him and enjoyed him so much. He still had, to the very end of his life, that great pleasure in life that was almost boyish at some times. At the same time, he was a very, very good businessman, very truthful, very organized, and candid about the way things should be. I remember him also saying, I'm the first ordinary citizen to be so named, and I'm greatly impressed to be able to follow in the footsteps of 3 presidents, 2 governors, and several renowned educators when Weber School was named for him. And I thought, you know, that's pretty true. How many schools are named for a living human being? You know, it's usually dead poets or presidents. And so it was pretty remarkable, and he knew that and was very excited about it. He played a very central role from the very beginning of the planning once the school was named for him, before the ground was even broken for the school. And I was named as principal in November of the year that the ground was broken, so it was the following September or August that the school opened. So from 93 in November, we started having pretty daily conversations, because he, of course, was launching the 8th volume, which had to be about Weber School and the schools of the district. You know, never at a loss for what's the next writing venture and where do I dig up the next piece of history. So he was on the phone once or twice a day for those first weeks after we met, talking about the details of the school, and we then continued to have conversations probably once a week or twice a week through most of those years that Weber was being formed and was in operation during his lifetime. He was at the groundbreaking, obviously. He then was proceeding with his book, and it was a very vital part of our dedication. All of this being a time of great excitement to him, and I can remember his dining room table. Many of you, I'm sure, sat around his dining room table exchanging historical facts or being interviewed by him with that intense curiosity that he had. And he played a very important role in our key events. The bell, we didn't have the authentic bell, but we had a replica that was given to us when we opened. And he rang the bell at the opening dedication. He rang the bell for the children and the teachers and myself, the parents who attended the assemblies. He would open those assemblies for us. So he was in the school a great deal and thoroughly enjoyed it. The children returned his great affection. I recall one time, to his horror, that he was about 3 minutes late, and he was always very prompt. He took great pride in being prompt, but there were some traffic conditions in picking him up and bringing him. And so the whole school was in the gym waiting for him. Not long, just really settled nicely. And I brought him into the door then as he came in a little late. And the children turned, and they were so pleased to see him with no prompting or anything. They all rose and applauded and parted for him to walk to the front of the room. It was a testimony to the way a person can touch a whole school just by the interest that he shows and with his sincerity. They absolutely adored him, because as he came, he would go to the classrooms, and he would look around, he would make comments, he would talk to individual children. He was very, very interested in everything that they did and in the school as a whole. And he particularly enjoyed the cards that they sent him. On Valentine's Day, before the school opened, we had a gathering of the parents and the students and trying to start to build community. And of course, he was a part of that. And the children decided that they would all write him Valentines because he couldn't be there at that time. That was the time that he was still having his ankle problems. And that evening he couldn't be there. So they made Valentines and strung them together. And we put him in a sack, and I delivered him to him. And the next time I saw him, those Valentines were strung clear around his room there at Lantern Square. And he told me exactly how many he had and how many shapes and the comments that were made on them. He was a great data collector, obviously, and details. And so he would record, and he'd have notes I'd see on the number of cards and other details such as that. He collected the details again and again. I mean, he interviewed students and he interviewed parents and children, and he became in turn our great living resource. When he would be at events or even when we had questions, they would say, well, we need to ask Irving about that. Mr. Weber, we need him. We need Mr. Weber. And I think that he gathered much of his work for some of his articles from there, and we certainly gleaned a lot from him. He always said, he was just an old man, as you know, his common phrase, with just happened to have a good memory. And please forgive me, I know I'll go on too long. That was one of his lines. And he would proceed to do so, but everybody was vitally interested, and it was okay. One of the few people that it's okay to just go on. His collage, you might be interested, and many of you would not know possibly. We have a very wonderful collage of his life there at Weber School. And the Dolphin fraternity that he was a part of helped pay for that, and the University of Iowa put it together for us. And so it's very similar to the one that's over at the university, but it has some unique traits as well, and he was very pleased to have that there. And it will be there, you know, forever, reminding children of this person who was so unique and versatile, and who really personified the characteristics that we honor in our character program at Weber, the 7 core virtues, which brings to mind the birthday parties. We had a birthday party for him every year that was an all-school birthday party, and he loved it because it was probably the largest birthday party anybody ever had. And another statistic, because we always had all the students, and then he invited a number of his friends each year. We would ask him, now who would you like to also have come? But probably the best birthday party was the last one that we had when while he was alive, because we still celebrate his birthday, but in different ways and in memory. But the last birthday party, we invited friends of his to speak on how he personified each of the 7 core virtues of the school. And if that weren't a testimony, we do have a video of that, and I thought I really should bring a clip of that tonight. But it should be in the montage of a milieu of things that he is remembered by. It was a wonderful testimony, and it was a wonderful example to the children. And it's such a rare thing to have over 400 children seated in a room, 7 speakers, now think about this, talking about an old man. And they were enraptured. They were captivated because the stories that connected were so vivid and so real, and they connected to values that matter to everybody. And that is what he brought, is that the common lessons that we share in our lives, the common needs, what brings us all together, not what divides us. He brought that across generations to children and to families. Quite a unique thing to be able to do. Another example of the children's love for him was when he carried the Iowa City torch for the Olympics. Parents and families, I didn't organize this, it would just happen. Parents and families decided, well, we have to be up there at City Park with a banner. So they made a banner, and there were several families that gathered and were there to cheer him on as he rolled by carrying his torch. And of course, he loved it, every minute of that attention. You mentioned how courtly he was among his other virtues, and very early on I said, I'm Celia. Dr. Berger. No, I'm Celia. Well, yeah. Eventually, I became Dr. Celia to him. But he made me feel, I didn't expect to feel the personal warmth and how much I would care for him. I thought, you know, he's a really nice man, and this is going to be great for school, and we're going to have a great time. But we built connections with the school, but I also experienced a great gift of caring for him so much as an individual, and it became a very personal tie that I will always cherish, and with his family. And at the day of the funeral, his family came to our home for dinner, and the 2 of the granddaughters, and I loved the stories that they told, because we saw him from this multifaceted man. You just didn't see all the facets. You knew they had to be there, and they had to be great. But one of the stories that they told was of Grandpa putting them in the wheelbarrow and running around the backyard with them when they were little. And it was just another side of him with his tie off and his red coat off. but loving children again. He was really a role model. His ice cream, his bell, his courtesy, and his interest in the students will always remain a part of Weber School. The children have made books about him, and those are reviewed every year on his birthday. And they, of course, are doing study the history of Iowa City periodically, so they turn to that book as well. And the traits that you would know would be there are certainly represented. But the ice cream cone, the bell, the pink coat, and the red coat are all there. And sometimes they seem to confuse him with me, get our relationship. They couldn't quite figure that out. So many times I was Mrs. Weber, and he was Mr. Berger. And then they'd get it all sorted out again. You recall Maggie Conroy's book, or her play, Irving Weber's Iowa City, and that was another fun experience for us at Weber because he was there so much, and we worked closely with Shirley Wyrick and with Maggie on that, and then they did a cutting from the play in the school. And so that was another connection that was a little unusual. Even now the kids associate ice cream, the bell, and both of us. And just to show that, they did a book for me when I left Weber in January. And I'm no longer there. I'm with Breakthrough to Literacy, which is a small company here in town that also deals with literacy. But I was kind of looking at things when I was getting ready, and I thought, oh, this just says it all. Right here, to Dr. Berger, Mr. Weber, pink jacket, bell, we will miss you, ice cream. So I'm still very closely associated with him. And I think that says a lot about who's most important with Weber School is Irving B. Weber, the man for whom it is named. We talk about living our lives as though they were works of art, and I believe that Irving Weber did that. And he loved our children and our school, and we in turn loved him. Thank you.
Thank you. I have to ask, Kara, are we to be out of here at 8 or?
No, you can
We can stay, oh good, because I wanted question time. I've got just 2 or 3 little things here. I should have mentioned that Irving's grandfather, Philip Weber, came from Germany in 1850. He was a wheelwright and a blacksmith. His shop was at 119 East Iowa Avenue. And he had 2 sons, William and Edward. And Edward was Irving's father. Here's something. Irving told me that his grandfather and father and uncle had a rule. They didn't allow any profanity in the blacksmith shop. That sounds like Irving, doesn't it? Now, I've got a couple of things here, but I'd rather get into the question part. It told when Eskimo pie was invented and when the ice cream cone was invented. Here's one thing, though. In 1947, a deal was made between Swanner's Dairy and Sidwell's Dairy. Sidwell sold the dairy part of the business to Swanner's, and Swanner's gave Sidwell the ice cream part of their business and also took over Russell Ice Cream Company. I'll just tell you, the Eskimo pie was invented in 1918, and Sidwell's was licensed to make it. Remember, it's a rectangular piece of ice cream with a 12% butterfat in those days, hand-dipped and wrapped in foil for 10 cents. And the ice cream was invented by accident in 1904 at the St. Louis World's Fair. A man named Hawks from Syria had the concession for selling crisp wafers. And one time the ice cream booth next to him ran out of dishes, and this man rolled one of the waffles into a cone, and the ice cream was dipped into it, and the ice cream cone was born. Now, at our store, we sold a double-dip ice cream cone for a nickel, and later had to go to 10 cents. Now I believe they're $1. Now, folks, you know, just the fact that all of you people came out on a hot day like this shows a tribute to Irving. I'm really glad, and I thank you all for coming. Now, let's have a question to any of the 3 people and that would like to ask us some questions.
I don't know about the building in Chicago. I'm wondering if you could enlighten us. Somebody.
The building in Chicago. Oh, you, yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, because I don't know
It's
about
a
it.
neighbor bill.
I don't know about it either.
Irving formed the quality check system, the Quality Check Dairy Association. He and 4 other dairies. And this was in the 1940s. Irving served as the only president of the Quality Check Dairy Association for 25 years. And up until just almost to the end, attended the annual meetings every year. And they built a new office building in Naperville, Illinois, and it's dedicated and called the the Weber Zimmerman Building. And that's.
Any other questions?
How did he remember stuff? I've been enjoying the history of Irving Weber on TV. How did he remember everything that went back? Way back when, how did he remember? Did he just remember all real people? How did he get here thing to write about? Did people hear him?
You answer that one too?
Yes.
Okay, he's gonna answer that one.
That's easy.
Go up to the
Cou-
microphone.
A couple things. One is, how did he remember?
Yeah.
He worked hard at it. He did, and he made notes, and he dug, and he researched, and when he couldn't do it, he had people like Bob Libby do it for him. And he kept digging that out. And the second part was,
I didn't hear.
Where'd he get his ideas?
Where did he get the
where did he get that? People always came up to him and said, oh, you need to write about my family's farm because thus and such. And Irving, right on the ball, he said, I'd be happy to, you start digging out the facts for me. And then he'd have the germ of an idea of a story, and from that, he would build with research through the Historical Society or the library or any number of places.
Ollie, have you got anything to add that we're gonna,
What?
do you have anything to add that we're left out that we should talk about?
What I thought of is that I've been reading his correspondence at the State Historical Society. And later in life at least, he became a compulsive storyteller, not only in his books and columns and talking to people, but in letters. And he could not answer a letter, no matter what the subject was. If he could think of a relationship between this person or this person's address or this person's town and something that was Iowa City history, it would go in that letter. He'd always say, well, when I get behind my typewriter, I just can't turn it off.
Yes, sir.
Bud, was Sidwell Dairy on West College Street, or
Yeah,
was
on
it
the
out on
hill.
North Dodge?
Halfway down the hill,
Okay.
up and halfway down.
Bud, a comment for those people who are here tonight that have all of Irving's books and find it difficult sometimes. They know that there's something in one of those books that they would like to refer to, but they don't know where to find it. There are no indexes. The Iowa State Historical Society has formed an index of the first 7 volumes, and they are available at the historical building.
Now, I've got an index that goes through the first 8 that the Lions Club did, do they?
No, the Lions Club has not to.
Well, somebody made,
Molly,
White Library.
Can I correct that? I mean, he's right, but also that's only 400 or so of his stories, and he wrote 850, and the public library has indexed all the stories, so
well,
you
the
can
other
get
day I was
everything.
trying to do a story
Both are
on,
useful.
I was trying to do a story on Terrell Mill, and I thought, who would know about that? And all of a sudden I thought, I wonder if Irving would, and I looked in this index, and he's mentioned 5 different times in his book, so it's a wonderful source of information. Everyone, you know, if you're at all interested in Iowa City, you should have but they're not gonna reprint them again, or they, you
Probably not. It loses something without Irving.
know. Any more questions tonight? Well, I sure, another one?
I was wondering, does anyone know how Irving met his wife Martha?
In a journalism class in
Oh, okay.
1922 at the university.
What was the question?
How he met his wife.
I think
How he
I'll
met Martha.
repeat it.
Oh,
I don't know.
The
question was, how did Irving meet his wife? And the answer was in a journalism class in 1922.
She was a
And
journalism major.
she was a journalism major, and she's originally from Ackley, Iowa, and that's where they were married.
Irving very seldom bragged, but I have to tell you, that one of the things he told me is that my wife has a genius IQ. Nonfiction.
Now, when you get this room ready next time, have the podium and the chair and everything, add a fly swatter.
You know, that fly was hanging around here this afternoon.
It's been here all day.
It's been here all day. Thank you so much. This was such a wonderful evening. Thank you to Bud Lewis and Celia
thank you
Berger
folks for
and Bob
coming.
Stein and Daryl Albright. Thank you so much.
Did they go around the corner?
Yes, and please come around the corner to the Englert Theater, dessert reception and tours of the theater. Thank you so much.